everyone, this is Indra, and today I'm going to show you how I edited my Piper photo, and I'm going to be showing you some very simple techniques on how I made that Fallout photo look like this. And I'm going to be using Photoshop, but I'm going to be using techniques that you can use regardless of the version of Photoshop that you have. I've been doing this since Photoshop 7. So it's pretty basic. So the first thing that I do with any picture is look at the brightness and contrast of it, and I adjust it. But this particular photo, I was really happy with how it looked. So what I do then is start looking at lights and shadows and seeing what needs to be adjusted. So before I do anything, I always create a background copy layer and work on that so that then I can adjust it, the transparency of that layer, in case I need it to be a little bit less robust. So this particular photo, I had a lot of shadows on my face, and there were a little bit of things that I really wanted to emphasize. So what I do is I just use my dodge tool and I go around like the face, anything where I feel that there should be more light, and then once I'm happy with it, then I use my burn tool and do the same thing with what I feel needs to be adjusted. I try to focus on things like creating more of an impact around the subject matter. So if, for example, it's the face, I try to do shadows around the face, just to push it a little bit further, or around the subject so that it creates that separation from the background. Just focusing a little bit on that depth of field without adjusting anything else at the moment. And if I feel like I need to add any further shadows that go along with the background, and once I'm happy with that, then I can go in with the transparency and adjust to what I feel looks the best. I also look at the layer styles and see if there's anything that I prefer how it looks. I play around with it a lot, actually. So this particular one, I lowered the transparency of that layer, and then I just used the luminosity. That way it would just create just the lights and shadows that I wanted without really affecting the brightness of it. So next thing that I do is I flatten my image and create a new background copy, and this is something that I always do. You don't have to do this. I prefer to do this because it makes me sort of commit to the work that I did. I find that it creates less lag for myself. You'll see a little lag because of the program that I'm using to record this, but it's fine. So what I do next is create two background copies. Middle copy, as you can see, I'm just gonna blur, and then the top layer, the top background copy, I'm going to just create a layer mask, and with a black paintbrush, and I make sure that the brush that I'm using is feathered, as you can see. I just go over it, all the spots where I want to have blurred, and this is an effect that you can actually use on different parts of the photo. It doesn't necessarily have to be the background, but you can use the same effect if you, for example, want to soften the skin or something like that, where you just don't want to use the blur tool. I find this super useful because then I can click on that blurred layer and I can change the transparency if I really want to, and that way I can control the intensity of it if I feel like, oh, that's too much. So it might look a little ridiculous at first, but as you work on it, it makes more sense. And I try to turn the layers on and off just so that I can compare and see if it really did anything, or if it's too intense, or if I need to lower the intensity a little bit. So then I make sure to go in, zoom in the photo, see if it was feathered enough, if there's anything that I should be touching up. And once I'm happy with it, then I do the same thing where I just flatten my image and then I create another background layer. And for this particular layer, what I am going to do is just start focusing on the little details of the background, since right now we're trying to keep the focus on the subject. And I felt like that box that was off to the side was a little too it didn't go very well with the flow of the picture, so I'm just trying to use the dodge tool again in midtones. I've actually used that midtones for everything so far, and I'm just adding some shadows right on top of it. And as you can see, it makes a difference because then it's almost like you don't see that anymore. Again, trying to keep the focus on the subject. So I will once again merge all those layers and then create a new background copy. And like I said before, I know that this is it takes a little while between each layer being merged, just because of the lagginess of the program that I'm using. But I hope you try out this method, because it actually helps me a lot to save my project. And of course, I do recommend on you saving your project as you go along, but do as I say, not as I do. So next thing that I'm going to do, though, is do what I call the beauty editing. And like I said, background copy, and I'm focusing on the eyes. I felt that they were a little too shark eye looking, so I'm brightening that up just using the dodge tool, and then I can compare, see if I like it. Then again, if it's too intense, I can change the transparency of that layer. At this point, I would do anything like if there's really bad dark circles or spots or anything that maybe just looks really off-putting in the photo, or I want it to look like a certain character, and it's just not really working in the photo or something. That's where I would do it. I try very hard to keep the photos as natural as possible, and instead work better on having a prepared costume, meaning I'd prefer to take more time doing my makeup and have a cake for my makeup than have to go in and Photoshop and try to adjust it. But of course, there are certain times where, you know, wrinkling might happen, or depending on the light, it might create certain shadows and things that need to be lightened. So that's what I would do at this point. And again, once you're happy with it, it's just merging all those layers and then creating a new background copy. So once I have this background copy, what I do is I like to give a little bit of life to my photos. So what I like doing is actually doing a gradient. So what I'll do is I'll create a new layer, and I will then use the gradient tool to add a little more color to my photos. So for this one, I'm picking the purple to orange gradient, and I just do one random gradient at first, and I will use soft light for the layer style. And then I'll just play around with the gradient. You know, I'll check how it looks from different points, seeing what I prefer, if I like if one color goes from one end to the other, or top to bottom, left and right. Like, I'll play around with it until I'm happy, and I try to pay attention to where the light is coming from and seeing how the color reacts to that. And once I'm happy with it, then I can do the adjustments that I need to. So I'm happy with how this looks, but I feel like it sort of made the subject part of the background. So I want to emphasize the subject again. So what I'll do is I'll just use my eraser tool, and I'll make sure that the opacity for the eraser is much lower. And that way I can do it in steps. So little by little I can erase until I feel happy with the result. That way it doesn't look such a stark difference between the subject and the background, because I still want it to look pretty cohesive. So I'll start sort of erasing parts, and of course the biggest thing, especially in cosplay and like the character, you want to focus on the face a lot. I feel like that's what sells the pictures. So once I'm happy with it and I don't look like an Oompa Loompa, you know, because of the orange and the gradient, then I check and see if there's anything else that I want to add. At this point, if I want to, I will add maybe some effects like dust particles, or maybe some bokeh effects on top of it, or if I want to add anything else to it. And again, I go in and out of the picture, as what I mean is I zoom in, zoom out, make sure that it's what I like. And once I'm happy with it, I'll merge all those layers and I will save my picture. But that's pretty much it. It's super simple. Of course, if it's a more complicated photo or needs more editing, then it might be a better idea not to merge all your layers. But as you can see, it's pretty effective for something very simple. Simple editing on the photos. I focus a lot on light and color. So I hope that this helps you. Hope that you liked it. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon.